Hello everyone, welcome to Discover This, and welcome back. Today we're going to pull something out of the old true crime files, and we're going to talk about spree killer Billy Cook. He left a lot of carnage around the U.S., starting in Oklahoma and then moving on west. There's been some other videos that have shown the crimes he committed in Oklahoma and where his gravesite is and things like that. But today we're going to concentrate on the southwest desert of the United States, where he fled to, and then he moved on into Mexico. And we're going to show you some of those sites and tell you the story of why he ended up out here and the things he did. So let's get going. Billy Cook was born in Joplin, Missouri in 1928. And he had a horrible upbringing. He had 10 siblings. When Cook was 5, his mother died unexpectedly, and the father soon after abandoned the children, leaving them to fend for themselves. Cook had a deformed eye, one that wouldn't close. He eventually got into petty crime and was sent to reform school. Then he eventually ended up in the Missouri Penitentiary. In 1950, Cook was released from prison and was briefly reunited with his father, with whom he had been estranged for many years. Cook told his father that from then on, he would live by the gun and roam. And that's exactly what he did. He drifted, roamed, hitchhiked around Missouri to Texas to New Mexico and beyond. Cook eventually ended up in Blythe, California, where he found work as a dishwasher at a local diner. One particular waitress was very kind to Billy and treated him well, always polite with him. Treated him like a human being, is what he said. Billy Cook later said that this woman was the only person who was ever kind to him in his whole life, treating him like a person. After living and working in Blythe for some time, Cook left in the middle of the night one night in late December 1950 and headed back east, hitchhiking to El Paso, Texas. It was in El Paso that Cook obtained a snub-nosed .32 caliber revolver. After El Paso, Cook hitchhiked up to Lubbock, Texas, where on December 28, 1950, he was picked up by a guy named Lee Archer. They traveled northeast, and when they got near Oklahoma City, Cook overpowered Archer and locked him in the trunk of his own car. Cook didn't know how to operate a manual transmission and got the car stuck in a ditch. Cook then flagged down a passing car, a blue 1949 Chevy sedan. Archer was able to free himself from the trunk, and he called the police. By the time the police got there, the blue Chevy was gone, heading west along Route 66. Inside Archer's car, police found Cook's duffel bag with his information that eventually led to his identification, including his tattoos and the fact that his right eye never closed due to a botched surgery. Inside that 1949 blue Chevy sedan was the Moser family. At gunpoint, Cook forced the father, Carl Moser, to drive from near Oklahoma City to Wichita Falls, Texas, then on to Carlsbad, New Mexico, then back to Houston, Texas, then up to Winthrop, Arkansas, and finally to Joplin, Missouri on January 2nd, 1951. Carl Moser twice tried overpowering Cook, one time in Wichita Falls where a gas station attendant saw them fighting and ordered them out of his station property, not knowing what was really going on. In Joplin, Cook panicked because a police car had passed by them twice. So Cook shot each member of the Moser family and dropped their bodies down an abandoned mine shaft. Cook then drove off in the Moser's car, and he eventually got that car stuck in a ditch in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Police found it on January 3rd, 1951, full of bullet holes and blood. After abandoning the Moser's car in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Cook headed west via bus and hitchhiking. Now law enforcement and the FBI were all looking for Cook. Wanted flyers were sent all over the U.S., and this ended up being one of the largest manhunts in U.S. history at the time. In Blythe, California, Deputy Homer Waldrop remembered that Cook had a friend from his time when he lived here and worked in Blythe, and that friend was still living in Blythe and living at one of the old motor court motels along the main drag of Blythe. So Deputy Waldrop went to the motel and went up to the room where that friend was living and knocked on the door. When the door finally opened, standing on the other side of that door was Billy Cook. Cook grabbed Deputy Waldrop and got his gun and had Waldrop remove his gun belt. He then walked Waldrop to his patrol car at gunpoint and forced Waldrop to drive him south through the desert. Along the way, Cook told the story of killing the Mosers, and the two made other small talk. Waldrop talking about his life, his career choice, and his wife, and what she did for a living. They basically traveled south via Highway 78 through Ripley, through Palo Verde, before turning off the 78. After heading south and southwest, Billy Cook ordered Deputy Waldrop to turn here. And he did. And they continued heading south. Now along Ogilvie Road, sort of near the old ghost town of Ogilvie, the railroad town, Cook ordered Waldrop to pull over. And he got Waldrop out of the patrol car and secured his hands and laid him down in the dirt. Cook told Waldrop the plan was to shoot him in the head. However, because he had found out that Waldrop's wife was the very same waitress that was so nice to Cook when he worked in Blythe, you remember, the only person who was ever nice to him in his life, he was going to spare his life. So Cook got in the patrol car and headed south and left Waldrop laying in the dirt. So about 7 miles south of where he left Deputy Waldrop, Cook came upon another car traveling south. He turned on the patrol car's flashing lights and pulled the car over. Inside that car was traveling salesman Robert Dewey from Seattle, Washington. When Cook tried to kidnap Dewey, Dewey tried to take the gun from Cook, but was wounded in the process. Cook shot Dewey in the head, killing him. Now there's two stories from here. Either Cook put Dewey's body in the trunk of the police car, or Cook left Dewey's body in the dirt near the patrol car. But either way, Cook took off in Dewey's 1947 Buick and kept heading south. He left the patrol car lights flashing, and about 2 hours later, a passing motorist found Deputy Waldrop and rescued him. They then found the deputy's patrol car a few miles down the road with the lights still flashing, and they found Robert Dewey's body. And Billy Cook took Robert Dewey's car and started heading south. And he eventually crossed into Mexico, and he crossed near Mexicali. And after going through Mexicali, the car broke down about 50 miles or so outside of Mexicali, and Billy Cook was back on foot, but not for long. Eventually, Cook came across two amateur prospectors, James Burke and Forrest Dameron, both from El Centro, California, who were down in Mexico looking for gold or looking for whatever they could find, being prospectors. Cook forced the two prospectors to drive him around for almost 2 weeks. They crisscrossed Baja California, finally ending up in a town called Santa Rosalia. Now, Mexican authorities were also looking all along the border and into Baja for the two missing prospectors and for Cook. Robert Dewey's car had been found at this point, and wanted posters on Billy Cook were plastered all over Mexico. On January 15th, 1951, the Chief of Police of Tijuana and the Chief of Police of Santa Rosalia finally found the three sitting in a cafe in Santa Rosalia and arrested Cook without incident. Now, about the same time that Cook was being arrested in Mexico, law enforcement in Joplin, Missouri found the bodies of the Mosers in that abandoned mine. Now, you may wonder why the prospectors didn't run or flee when Cook was sleeping. Well, their story is that they didn't know when he was really sleeping or not because his one eye was always open and he always had his hand on his gun. So that's why they were with him for about 2 weeks. Cook was brought to Tijuana and held. Mexican authorities displayed the weapons that Cook had while he was in Mexico. Now, Mexico did not have an extradition treaty with the U.S. at the time, and Mexico declared Cook an undesirable person. Cook was brought to the U.S. border between Tijuana and the U.S. and was literally pushed across the border into the waiting hands of U.S. law enforcement. There were hundreds of Mexican citizens at the border to watch. Cook was taken to Oklahoma for trial in the Moser's killings. Because Cook had taken the Mosers across state lines, it was a federal trial. Cook pled guilty to kidnapping, but because of disputes over Cook's mental health, he was never tried for the murders. He received 300 years in federal prison and was sent to Alcatraz. Now, there was a lot of anger over the fact that Cook had murdered the Mosers and wasn't being held accountable. So Cook was tried in California for the murder of Robert Dewey. In 1951, he was found guilty of that murder and was sentenced to death. And on December 12, 1952, Billy Cook was executed in the gas chamber at San Quentin Prison. Now, this story of Billy Cook ended up being the inspiration for a movie called The Hitchhiker. Also, Jim Morrison of The Doors was fascinated by the story of the hitchhiker, of this particular hitchhiker anyway, and used part of the story in the lyrics in Riders on the Storm. This is verse 2. So as you all are singing this song, as you're driving down the road, this is what this verse is about. Also, Jim Morrison made a movie called Highway. It was really only shown once and never really released. And he played the lead character, a hitchhiker named Billy. Well, that's going to do it for our story on Billy Cook and the crimes he committed out here in the desert. I hope you enjoyed it. I appreciate you watching. We'll have some other true crime stories coming up, more of the biker violence stuff, and just more exploring and just stories. So keep watching, and we will see you next time on Discover This.